Welcome back to the Bill and Doug Show. I'm Bill Landis, solo with you on a Monday morning. Happy Labor Day to anyone watching. Hope you're off from work today and get to enjoy an extra day of rest and a 3-day weekend that was full of some pretty awesome college football. This will be a Monday rewatch show that I think will be the plan for us most Mondays during the season. And I think it will more often than not be me. Doug could definitely join me from time to time and perhaps even do it himself. But we spend a lot of time over the weekend rewatching Ohio State's games and have a lot of thoughts and opinions on that, and only so much space to talk about it. So I think we're going to use the Monday morning show to focus on probably usually one thing and kind of really drill down on that sort of idea, something that stuck out from the game. With this being the first game Ohio State's win over Texas, beating the number one team in the country, there's a lot to get into. So I think this one might be a little wider ranging than that, but I am going to focus on the defense. Going to focus on what Matt Patricia did in that game, which was incredibly impressive. Before I talk about it, I will address my initial reaction to Matt Patricia being hired by Ohio State, because I saw enough of it, people mentioning it, which is totally fair. I expressed an opinion. My opinion was wrong. You can tell me my opinion was wrong. And I'll admit that I was wrong. And that's really all I can do, I guess, as I try to analyze it. But I don't want to just blow past that and talk about how good I thought Matt Patricia's debut was without at least acknowledging how wrong my initial reaction to his hiring was. So this is me doing that. And I would guess I would say too, on the topic of that, some of the things that I was concerned about, like purely from a football standpoint, was Matt Patricia's ability to take all of what he knows from his time in the NFL. And I think a lot of people watch Matt Patricia, that interview that he did with Julian Edelman after Ohio State. He did it before Ohio State hired him, but a lot of people sort of went and found it after the fact, after Ohio State hired him. And he talked about his Bible, right? The binder full of defense that he had developed over the years, that he had learned from Bill Belichick. And there's a lot there. And certainly a concern of mine, or at least a curiosity of mine, was how do you distill that down and get college football players to grasp that in a way where they can implement it on the field and still play fast and not feel overwhelmed, because it can be, I would imagine, quite overwhelming for a lot of guys who are 19, 20, 21 years old and still very much developing as football players. But Matt Patricia got here in the spring and seemed to connect with the players right away. And you heard a lot from them about his teaching style, and he's talked a lot about being a teacher too. I actually think he does perhaps like that part of his job the most. Clearly he's a good schemer and a good, and one game sample size with Ohio State is a good game planner, but he comes from a family of teachers, and I think he fancies himself a teacher, as some coaches do, and seems like he was able to teach this game plan, at least this Texas game plan, to a T, to his players, and they executed it incredibly well. It was among the most impressive coaching debuts I think I've seen in my time covering Ohio State. Maybe the most impressive if I stop and think about it for a second, given the caliber of opponent, what they were tasked with, sort of what the narrative was about Ohio State, particularly its defense, and especially in this matchup against Texas and Arch Manning. I think there was just an assumption that Ohio State wasn't going to be ready for it defensively, and it turned out that the side of the ball in that matchup that wasn't ready for it was Texas's offense, and that's all the credit to Matt Patricia and Ohio State's defensive staff, and maybe first and foremost the Ohio State players for putting that plan on the field and playing as well as they did. So there are a couple of things I want to focus on with that, and I'm going to write about this more on our Substack page, if I can plug that. Bill and Doug OSU.substack.com. $9.99 a month if you'd like to subscribe. You can also subscribe for free if you want to just see what we're about and see the kind of stuff we publish before you decide whether or not you want to pay for it. We always appreciate that too, but we'll definitely write more in depth about some of the things that we will discuss here today. This will be a quick show. I don't ever want these to be longer than probably 12 to 15 minutes. Short kind of morning hit, and we'll have more throughout the day. We have something pretty cool planned later on today. Doug, myself, getting a couple other people on the Ohio State beat involved, so you can look for that later on this feed on Monday. even though it is Labor Day, we're going to have a second show. And also thank you to everyone who's subscribed to the channel so far. This channel has not existed very long, and we have a pretty nice subscriber base already. And a bunch of you guys checked in to the live post game show that we did on Saturday night after Ohio State's win. So that is very much appreciated. I know we're doing some new things, some things that are maybe a little bit unfamiliar, and it was weird timing for all of it. So we very much appreciate the support. We appreciate anyone who takes the time to watch us here, listen to us on podcast feeds, to subscribe to Substack. Whichever way you're doing that, you're helping us. So Doug and I really appreciate it. To Ohio State's defense, and the thing that maybe was most surprising to me was like just how much they did. And I know they had a long time to prepare for that game, and part of me wonders if they set such a high standard because it was such a strong caliber of opponent, and clearly they had put a lot of thought into how they were going to defend Steve Sarkisian's offense and Arch Manning, and then just execute it really well. I know that Texas made a few plays at the end, but it was like 3/4 of dominance almost. And then even in the fourth quarter, after giving some stuff up, Ohio State, got 2 fourth down stops in the fourth quarter, and what ended up being a 1-score game. So that's another feather I think Matt Patricia can put in his cap, because if you want to compare him to his predecessor, which is natural, Jim Knowles, like his tenure ended with a national championship, but prior to last postseason, I know a lot of people were frustrated that Ohio State would play in these big games and the defense wouldn't be able to get stops. And Matt Patricia, in his first game, the defense got 4 first down stops in total, but 2 in the fourth quarter. That's pretty crazy. And again, that's credit to everyone involved, not just Matt Patricia, but also the players. But this defense started to show some resolve in that way last year in the postseason, clearly, but it's carried over to this year. And that has to be really encouraging, I think, to do it against that kind of team. So sticking with the theme, I guess, of comparing what has happened with Ohio State's defense over the last 3 years to what Ohio State put on the field against Texas. And I'm not like necessarily trying to retcon the Jim Knowles era and say like, you know what, actually he wasn't good. Whatever you think of him. And I know like the way he left was super weird. And if anyone has like a bad taste in their mouth based off the way that Jim Knowles left, I certainly understand that. But that relationship ended with what it needed, which was a national championship for Ohio State. And, Ohio State will get to face Jim Knowles in November when they play Penn State. And maybe if there's some added animosity there, they can take it out on Jim Knowles' defense in that game. But clearly Ohio State had championship level defense last year. But even with that, there were things that we saw on Saturday that I thought were significantly like more sophisticated than what Ohio State has done maybe in the entire time that I've covered the team, which goes back to 2014. And maybe I suppose that's not surprising because of Matt Patricia's NFL background, but it was a bit jarring. Well, jarring is pejorative. Shocking in a good way, like refreshing, maybe. Refreshing is probably the right word. Because some things that like I have been wondering if Ohio State would ever get to, which is like varying fronts and using guys in some different ways and highlighting specific skill sets with guys like an Arvell Reese. And there have been other guys like Arvell here in the past where like Ohio State just never really tapped into that. And in his first game, Matt Patricia did it. And you can't help but be super excited for what that means for the future for a guy like Arvell, because there's still so much more to unlock there. And you seemingly have a defensive coordinator who is devising game plans with that in mind. Like, how do I take my special elite players, guys like Arvell Reese, guys like Caleb Downs, based off the first game? You might say that Jermaine Matthews is entering that territory, if perhaps not there already. And how do you accentuate their strengths and create mismatches and confuse offenses? And he checked every box in that way against Texas. And it's just it's fun. Like, maybe that's the best word for it. It's fun. Like, and it's not like Ohio State's defense last year was great, but you kind of knew what they were going to do game to game, even as a defense evolved after the Oregon loss in the regular season and changed to, moving Caleb Downs a little bit more. They changed up their front a little bit, but then they kind of just did that for the rest of the year. And I wonder, and I would maybe predict, that Matt Patricia like defense week to week might look drastically different because I don't know if everything we saw against Texas on Saturday is what's going to show up every week. And the idea of being like game plan and opponent specific is maybe more of an NFL thing than it is a college thing. But Chip Kelly brought some of that to Ohio State's offense last year, and I think some of that has stayed despite Chip Kelly leaving. Or I'm interested to see if it does. And I think maybe the defense will start operating in a similar fashion. And you have a coordinator in Patricia who seems pretty well suited to do that. So I don't know if we're going to see all these things again moving forward or how often we'll see them, but I did take note of them. I want to start with just like basic like alignment, how Ohio State lined up because it was noticeable to me from the first snap. So here's the first snap against Texas, and you'll see like the defensive tackles, both of them like lined up in the B gap, and that is just very different from how Ohio State lined up regularly last year. And here's a look at the first snap from the game against Texas in the Cotton Bowl last year. So like notice the difference in the defensive tackles here. And I know some people are maybe listening to this, so I'll try to describe it and not watching it. So if you look at the first snap here from the Cotton Bowl last year against Texas, you have a defensive tackle lined up in a B gap as a 3 technique between the guard and the center, or the guard and the tackle to the right side of the screen. And then you have the other defensive tackle in a 1 technique between the guard and the center. And that was basically how Ohio State lined up on every play, save for like, very obvious passing down situations. Maybe that's when Jim Knowles would vary the front a little bit, but it was few and far between. Like this is more or less what you got. So you went from that basically on every defensive snap last year to this, which is now you have just like a wider front and you have your tackles specifically spread out more, both of them kind of more between the tackles, both of them more in the B gap rather than having one in the B gap and one in the A gap. And then you have your linebackers, I think, responsible for the A gap. And Ohio State would, against Texas, would like shift in and out of this, or like it would start off in that old kind of formation and then stem late to something like this, or would also stem to these 5-man fronts. And this was like by far the thing we saw the most from Ohio State's defense, were these 5-man odd fronts where you would have a tackle lined up right over the nose. We saw Caden McDonald do it. We saw Edric Houston do it. We saw Will Smith Jr. do it. And then you have these 2 other interior linemen again lined up in the B gap. And then you would have a defensive end standing up on one end, and then usually Arvell Reese standing up on the other. And the thing that was cool about this to me was Ohio State can shift in and out of like odd and even fronts, 4 down, 5 down, without substituting. Because in this shot that I'm showing you of this 5 down front from Texas, one of the stand-up ends is Caden Curry, and one of the interior tackles is Kenyatta Jackson. So like you have to have some versatility, and they put Bo Atkinson, the transfer from UNC, in that position too. So just the variance of fronts and not being static and thinking like about specifically what might give Texas some issues and might confuse an offensive line that had 4 new starters playing in a raucous road environment, a quarterback making his first road start. Like it's not reinventing the way you play defense, but I just thought it was something like next level compared to what we saw much of last year. And I think that was likewise true for some of the stuff we saw in the back end with the coverages. Similar to last year, like Ohio State did play a lot of split safety coverages, mostly split safety coverages. There were a handful, I think, of like cover 1 man, one of which was Jermaine Matthews' interception. But by and large, Ohio State was playing a lot of cover 2, a lot of Tampa 2, a lot of 2 high safety stuff. And that was a carryover from last year. It's in an effort to, I think, like limit the explosive plays. So that wasn't surprising. That's maybe the one thing coming out of an offseason in which Ryan Day said often that Ohio State's defense wasn't going to change much from last year. It definitely changed with the way that Matt Patricia is going to utilize the front. If this first game is any indication, that's changing like in a fairly significant way. But in terms of coverages, maybe not. We'll have to see as the season progresses. Ohio State just landed on something like really productive last year, playing more split safeties, playing its nickel back and allowing Caleb Downs to play up closer to the line of scrimmage. And obviously you want to continue that. If you're Matt Patricia, he's your best player. You want to put him closer to the ball. So that's just smart. And we saw a lot of that in this game against Texas. But even that idea, right? Like, oh, you're playing a similar style of coverage more or less. But even like the some of the Tampa 2 looks where you have the two deep safeties and then you have like that third middle sort of intermediate zone player who's sort of like in between the third level and the second level, hovering in the middle of the field. That was Caleb Downs sometimes. That was Jalen McClain sometimes. On one play, it was Davis and Igbinosun, which I don't think we ever saw a corner do that last year. And like that's the kind of stuff where yes, it's a thing that Ohio State had done, but then Matt Patricia is like sprinkling a little something different on it. And like just that next degree ended up confusing Arch Manning in a way where for much of the game, I felt like Arch Manning had no idea what he was looking at, even if ultimately the coverages were kind of similar. Like once everybody moved around and got to their positions, the coverage was some version of cover two, probably, I don't know, 50% of the time at least. But the way that Ohio State got to it, the way that it looked before it got to that, Arch Manning and Steve Sarkisian never really appeared to have a beat on that. And there were even times when, um, like Ohio State would make its defensive backs move with motion in a way that like might suggest that they're playing man, and then they would drop out into a zone, and it's like I don't know, like Arch Manning, Arch Manning's basically a freshman. Like I know he's a junior, but he's not played a lot. He's certainly not played in high leverage situations, and I don't know what he's supposed to do in those situations other than learn from them, right? Like I don't, I know that there's a lot of discussion about like Arch was overhyped and he's not as good as anyone says he is. And like we'll see. It certainly wasn't a good debut, but I also think it's possible that 2 years from now, after Arch Manning has an incredibly productive college career and is going off to the NFL as a high draft pick, he'll have some kind of conversation about the first start he made on the road against Ohio State when Matt Patricia had his head spinning for 4 quarters and how much of a better quarterback that made him because of how much he learned that day. So it was a bit of a baptism, I think, for Arch Manning and probably Steve Sarkisian, and maybe a bit of a humbling there because Sark is considered one of the better play callers in college football. And on that particular day, Matt Patricia had the best of him. So there was a ton there. Again, I'll write more about this on our Substack page. We'll keep talking about it as Ohio State gets ready to play Grambling. Obviously, it's not the same kind of game, but I was just one again wrong, me, this guy wrong, and super impressed by what Ohio State's defense put on the field, both schematically, talent wise. A lot of young guys who had been biding their time, who I think Ohio State fans who understand the roster knew would be ready when their time came, but you can never be 100% certain of that. And then the time came, and to a man, those guys were awesome. Like I don't know that there's anybody, at least among like the defensive regulars, that I would say like, you know what, that guy didn't play well against Texas. Did everybody play their absolute A game? No, but that's okay. It's game one. But a few guys did, and a few of those guys who did were guys who were stepping up in the starting spots for the first time. So could not ask for a better start from Ohio State's defense. Could not ask for a better debut from Matt Patricia as a game planner and a play caller. And I think that there was a lot of discussion coming into that game. Does Texas have the best defense in the country? I think it's too early to label anybody the best defense in the country. But if anyone thought that Ohio State, which had the best defense in the country last year, was going to fall off precipitously, that's not happening. That much is clear after what Ohio State's defense put on the field in Saturday's win against Texas. So we'll wrap up there. Thank you guys again for checking this out. We will be on YouTube basically every day. We will have additional podcast stuff on Substack again, Bill and Doug, osu.substack.com if you want to give that a shot. You can find this show wherever you find podcasts as well. We're going to be doing a ton. As Doug said, we're going to hit you over the head with a lot of Ohio State coverage as we get this thing rolling, and we appreciate you supporting us as we do so. So thanks for watching this. This has been your Monday Rewatch on the Bill and Doug Show. We'll talk to you later this afternoon with a pretty cool roundtable, we'll call it, with myself and Doug and some other people from the Ohio State beat. Until then, catch you later.